delighted today to again have Cynthia Gerbert from the Victorian Energy and Water Ombudsman, or who she is, the Victorian Energy and Water Ombudsman. And also we've got 6 members from EWOLF who are going to be working with the groups in the breakout rooms. So again, thank you so much for 1, volunteering, and 2, coming in to work with us for these this series of workshops. We also have one of our commissioners, Sitesh Bajani, who I suppose you could say is our sponsor, and he will be hosting this as well. So just before we start, I'm going to, if I can find it, we had a poll. Just quickly, you'll see a poll come up, just asking you what sector you actually are representing. So it's interesting for us to see how many people we have from community legal and from financial counselling, and also from EWOLF, ESC, and possibly from some other areas as well. I'll leave that poll up as we go. I just wanted to also introduce my colleagues who are helping from the ESC. And with any workshop, even though this is online, there's been a lot of work go on behind the scenes. So I'd like to thank Casper Matt, our Senior Regulatory Manager for Enforcement, Matt Sargent and Linda Grant, who are leading the presentation today, Jess Gregory, David Bonney, James Wells-Wilson, June Jiang, Alice Moore, and we have 4 people who are on secondment to the Commission from EWOLF, Maggie Di Battista, Fiona Clark, Peter May, and Christina Scarbossa, who it's really lovely to have them with us as well. Some of you may know that I did work at EWOLF for 7 years, so it's lovely to continue this working relationship. I'm just going to tell you the poll results. So we've got 51%, 26 people from financial counselling, 10%, 5 people from community legal. We've got 7 people from EWOLF at the moment and 12 from the ESC. Just goes to show how many people we need this. So I'm going to end that one. And I'm also just going to ask you, last time we asked you a question, and you may know, you may remember this question. We asked where you were Zooming from, either from the city, further out from the city, and we were interested to see it because it also goes to show us how more accessible these workshops are being for people while they're being done online. So I think we got a really good representation of people who were quite a bit out of the city. And of course, to come into the city where our new office is, where we're not, it makes it's a whole day. And so we understand that a lot of you wouldn't have the time to begin with, and it's a huge effort. So just looking at that poll, we've got 9 people who are further than 80 kilometres away. That's 19%. I think that's amazing. And 3 who are between 40 and 80 kilometres away. And then we've got most 29% in the northern suburbs, and 11 people, 22% in the western suburbs. And then we've got representation from of course, the south. And I did forget the eastern suburbs. How shocking. You can see my bias. I'm so sorry. I will fix that up and reopen it at some point. Terribly sorry about that to the eastern suburbs.
That would be the remaining 3, and I'm one of them.
Thank you, David. All right, look, I'm going to hand over to Sitesh. As I said, we are pretty jam-packed today, but Sitesh, over to you.
Thank you very much, Anne. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the fellow commissioners at the ESC, welcome to this workshop on the Victorian Payment Difficulties Framework in the energy sector. Thank you all for making the time to join us for this second in a series of 6 workshops on consumer rights or entitlements and energy retailer obligations in Victoria. As many of you would know, these workshops are primarily directed for the benefit of those of you on the front lines, advising and helping consumers having problems with energy retailers in Victoria. The Commission is hoping that through this collaboration with you, collectively, we will be able to deliver better outcomes for Victorian energy consumers. The Commission takes very seriously the goal of improving outcomes for Victorian energy consumers. So I will be representing my fellow commissioners and participating in each of the 6 workshops. And as Anne has already introduced, we have staff members from both the Commission's Energy Division Compliance Team and Enforcement Team. Ladies and gentlemen, providing information or assistance on the substantive topics like the Payment Difficulties Framework, disconnections, family violence, explicit informed consent, and clarifying the differing roles between the Commission on the one hand and the Energy and Water Ombudsman Victoria on the other is only one of the goals of these workshops. Another goal is that we hope you will get to know us more and even our roles much better, and therefore feel comfortable contacting us with specific cases of concern that you may come across. From the Commission perspective, this is especially true for our enforcement team members, as the Commission is in the process of getting stronger enforcement powers, and where necessary, the Commission is serious about taking enforcement action, especially to protect consumers facing vulnerability. I know that the Energy and Water Ombudsman Victoria also takes seriously the goal of improving outcomes for Victorian energy consumers. Indeed, as you have already heard, Cynthia Gabert, the Ombudsman herself, has again made the time to attend and participate in this workshop. Hi, Cynthia. The Commission sincerely appreciates and acknowledges Cynthia and her staff from EWOV for joining and participating with us in these workshops. Now, after today, we will still have a number of workshops on topics like consumer rights in the disconnection process, family violence issues in the energy sector, explicit informed consent. What is it and when is it required? So your feedback and suggestions on how we can improve these workshops for your benefit would be greatly appreciated. Okay, so now to today's topic, the Payment Difficulties Framework. The framework forms part 3 of the Commission's Energy Retail Code and came into effect on the 1st of January 2019. The Commission has said publicly that it will review the PDF, the Payment Difficulties Framework, after 2 years of operation to see how it's working. So that PDF review is likely to occur early next year. The purpose of the Payment Difficulties Framework is to set out minimum standards of assistance to which residential customers anticipating or facing payment difficulties are entitled, so that disconnection of a residential customer for not paying a bill is a measure of last resort. Now, to give us all a more detailed presentation on the PDF, I would like to introduce you to 2 very experienced investigators at the Commission, Matthew Sargent and Linda Grant. Matt and Linda are both members of the Energy Enforcement Team at the Commission. And I hand over to you now, Matt and Linda.
Thank you, Satish. And hello all. My name's Matthew. I'm a senior investigator in the enforcement team. Before we get into the content, I just thought I would like to talk about our team a little bit. And I also have a 2-year-old daughter who's running around outside the door. So, and she would love to make 70 new best friends. So I apologize in advance if that happens. So the enforcement team at the Commission is reasonably new. We're a small team here. We're made up of investigators with different backgrounds. Some of us have policing experience, others have legal training, others have investigative experience at other regulators. Some of us have, some of the others have been with the Commission for a couple of years. Others, like Linda and myself, have only been with the Commission for a few months. But I would like to say that certainly at case officer level, we're very pleased to be speaking with you today. We see this not just as an opportunity to share some information about the code, but it's also our chance to introduce ourselves to you and to extend an invitation to work with us to help us to bring about those positive outcomes for Victorian energy consumers that we're seeking. More specifically, we really hope that as a result of these workshops, you are happier to engage with us and to help us engage with your clients to be able to build enforcement cases and to hold energy businesses to account. So we'll get into the content, I suppose, Linda.
Okay, I will share my screen. Okay, is that coming up?
Well done, Linda.
Yep, it's working. That's a good sign.
Excellent. All right, so go Matt.
Okay, so I just wanted to give a bit of an overview of the PDF before Linda gets into a bit more of the detail. So the payment difficulty framework is located in part 3 of the Energy Retail Code, and it talks about obligations and entitlements for retailers and for customers. To summarise, I suppose the code breaks up the assistance that's available to customers based on whether or not they are in arrears. So if they haven't missed a bill, or if they have missed a bill, or they're in arrears, there's different entitlements for those customers. If they're not yet in arrears, then they're entitled to what's called standard assistance. If customers are in arrears, then they're entitled to what's called tailored assistance. And tailored assistance is further broken up into a couple of different customer cohorts. And to try and simplify it, we've called those those entitlements tier 1 and tier 2. That's terminology that's not in the code. It's just for us to try and help to simplify it. But tier 1 entitlements are for customers who can afford to pay their ongoing energy costs, and they would be able to pay back the arrears over time. Tier 2 entitlements are for customers who can't afford to pay their ongoing energy usage. And so there's some extra entitlements for those customers. That's a high level overview. I'll pass to Linda to go a little bit more in depth.
Yep. Okay. So standard assistance, which I guess is the first limb. Standard assistance is an entitlement that all Victorian residential customers are entitled to. So it's designed as a preventative measure to help customers keep on top of their bills so they avoid getting into arrears and consequently having to access that tailored assistance. So there are 4 different forms of assistance in the code, which are on the screen there, which the retailer must provide at least 3 of those 4, although they may choose to provide all of them, but the minimum is they must provide at least 3. They must be proactive in communicating that this assistance is available to customers. So, for example, in any conversations with customers or written documents that they send to customers, which may include contracts, bills, bill inserts, notices, and the information must also be on the retailer's website, and it must be clear, plain and legible language. Some examples of what equal payments over a specified period might look like. So say someone has a $300 quarterly bill, they might set up $50 per fortnight or $100 a month over 3 months to cover that $300 quarterly bill. Intervals, might choose different intervals for payments than their normal standard payment intervals, so weekly, fortnightly, monthly. They can extend the pay by date for a bill at least once in any billing cycle, in a 12-month period, although the retailer may allow further extension. And they can also choose to pay energy use in advance. So basically that's an entitlement for all customers in Victoria. So tailored assistance, what we referred to as tier 1, is when a customer has become into arrears, but they can continue to pay for their ongoing or future use. So perhaps they've had circumstances that have led to them becoming in arrears, but those circumstances are not ongoing, so they may be able to pay for their ongoing use, but they still are having trouble with some arrears that have accrued. So these are the minimum entitlements that they're entitled to. So they can have repayments at regular intervals of up to a month interval, and that can be up to 2 years to repay those arrears. They also are entitled to advice that would be to enable them to pay that arrears off over that 2-year period. And also advice on their likely future usage and costs, which would be based on historical usage, not if known to the retailer, so if they've been a customer for some time. And also assistance on how those costs may be lowered. They're also entitled to advice about any government or non-government assistance that they may be either eligible or entitled to. So I guess government concessions or grants, such as the Utility Relief Grant Scheme, pension or healthcare cards. All concessions should be applied to a customer for which they are eligible for, and should include any retrospective application if they've missed a concession. Okay. So tailored assistance tier 2 is for customers who are in arrears who can't continue to pay for their the full cost of their ongoing use. So there's circumstances that led to arrears may be ongoing, and that may impact their ability to pay indefinitely. So they're entitled to the same advice as the tier 1 customers, for example, the likely future costs and usage, and also advice about any government or non-government assistance available. They're also available to what's called practical assistance to lower costs. So that may include checking if they're on the best tariff or offer, so a market retail contract or a standard retail contract. This is assessed based on a pattern of usage and payment history. They also can get assistance on how to reduce their usage, which may take into account their circumstances, such as where they live. They may be eligible to do a home or over the phone audit, energy audit, provided with energy saving tips, such as some energy saving devices or monitoring devices, apps, energy efficient appliances. And they're also available to have their arrears put on hold for a minimum of 6 months, which will allow them time to implement those assistance provided to lower their costs. Customers can pay less than the full ongoing cost of their usage during the period. However, any balance of unpaid ongoing costs will be added to the total amount of those arrears, and retailers must inform their customers of this. Any arrears on hold, so once that 6-month period has finished, the retailer has got the discretion, although they're not obliged to, but they can at their discretion extend that for a further period or further periods if that would assist the customer to continue to lower their costs or usage. Also, customers at the end of the 6-month hold period are still entitled to access assistance under the tier 1 at the end of that whole period. So for example, they could then enter into a 2-year payment plan. Another thing to note is that retailers may and are encouraged to provide additional assistance over and above the minimum, as long as they're consistent with the objective of the payment difficulties framework. And I think the next one is Matt.
Yep. Okay, so we've spoken about the different entitlements that are available under the PDF, and how the code breaks up the customers into customers who don't have arrears and who do, and then further for the customers who are in arrears, for those who can afford to pay the ongoing use of their energy cost, and those who can't. Would just want to share some content about kind of how that works in reality, and so we'll talk about the communication flow between the customer and the retailer. If a customer misses a bill and calls the energy company for help, regardless of how much that arrears is, then they're entitled to be given information about the entitlements that are available. If a customer is in arrears of more than $55, then the retailer must actually contact the customer within 21 days after the pay-by date to discuss what entitlements the customer has. So customers obviously can't be told, you've missed a bill, you have to pay your bill. They need to be contacted if it's over $55 and be told about what entitlements they have available to them. Once they've had that conversation, the retailer must allow 6 business days for the customer to consider the information and to ask further questions. And if the customer wants to pay off their arrears in instalments, to put forward some sort of payment proposal. And we've got some more information about what a reasonable payment proposal would be. During these conversations, retailers should consider what the customer's preferred contact method is, and they should try and contact the customer on whatever their preferred method is. And if one communication method isn't working, then they've got to use their best endeavours to get in contact. So they should be trying different forms of contact. Now, we discussed payment proposals. We might, I think the next slide has some detail about what a reasonable payment proposal would be. Okay. So for tier 1 entitlements, so for customers who can afford to pay the ongoing cost of their energy usage, but they're paying off the arrears over time, the code kind of tells us what a reasonable payment proposal is. So retailers have to accept a payment proposal made by a customer if it meets this criteria. So some of the criteria there is if it provides for the making of payments of equal amounts at regular intervals of up to 1 month, so up to monthly payments, that it would result in the arrears being paid off in no more than 2 years after the first payment, that it provides for the energy, for payments for energy use being made together with those payments to reduce the arrears, and that it's based on a reasonable forecast of the customer's energy use over the next 12 months. We've published a guidance note on the payment difficulty framework, and that's available on our website, and provides some even more in-depth examples and explanations. There's an example in the guidance note in relation to these payment plans, and it says that if a customer is with $500 of arrears and who is using about $150 worth of energy in a month, if they propose to pay $200 per month for their arrears and for the ongoing use of energy, then that would comply with these requirements, and they would pay off their arrears in about 10 months, and the retailer must accept that payment proposal. Once the payment proposal has been accepted, the retailer must send a written schedule of the payments and the dates due to the customer. All right, so on the next slide, I think we're going to talk about what would happen if a customer misses a payment plan payment. Yep. Okay, so the code, regardless of whether it's a tier 1 entitlement or a tier 2 entitlement, the code says that retailers must do similar things, which is they must contact the customer to have a discussion about varying the amount or the frequency of the payments, or putting forward a revised proposal. So that's an obligation on the retailer. If a payment plan payment is missed, the retailer must contact the customer in a timely way. There's no days set, like everything under the payment difficulty framework. Individual circumstances come into every different case, but it must be in a timely way. Our guidance note does make a little bit clearer what customers taking. Yeah, so down the bottom of that slide, it says that if a customer engages with a retailer and takes reasonable action towards making agreed payments, then the tailored assistance must continue. And our guidance note kind of goes into a little bit more detail about what reasonable action is. The Commission considers that failure to make individual payments or occasionally underpaying or paying late would not justify suspending the tailored assistance in most circumstances. So missing one payment plan payment is not a suitable justification to disconnect a customer. The code and the guidance note is quite clear that reasonable action must be taken by the customer to address their payment difficulty, and there is an expectation that customers will pay their bills when they're able to, but it would, the Commission expects or considers that it would be repeated consecutive failures to make payments proposed by the customer in the absence of other circumstances. That's what would be required to justify suspending the assistance and starting the disconnection.
Over to me again.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is an obligation that retailers must have in terms of having the payment difficulty framework information, also their hardship policy information on their websites. They also need to have approaches to lowering energy costs and all the government and non-government assistance that may be available. This all needs to be information included on their website. It must be accessible, so the guidance note goes into a bit more detail on the expectation, what accessible means. So it's in a prominent position on the website. It's not hidden within a page that requires potentially multiple web clicks to find it. So within 1 to 2 clicks might be considered best practice. It must also be in a format that is able to be printed and read easily by the customer. Any written payment difficulty framework information must be sent to a customer who requests it, and it also must be legible in clear, plain language. The information must be provided free of charge. In the first instance, the code does go into retailers may be able to impose a reasonable charge for further requests within that 12-month period, but the first is definitely must be free. General retailer obligations. So basically the whole of the PDF framework should be, I guess, through the lens of the general obligations. So retailers must take into account all known circumstances of a customer and act fairly and reasonably having regard to those circumstances. So that includes taking into account circumstances of customers that may be affected by family violence, a death in the family, potentially a serious medical condition, either themselves or a family member, disability, they might have English as a second language, low literacy or numeracy, they maybe have experienced a recent loss of employment or any urgent expenses such as house or car repairs that have arisen. So that's not an exhaustive list, but it is sort of, I guess, some of the kinds of things that they must have regard to. And they must show respect and empathy towards customers who are experiencing difficulties. They have to give clear and unambiguous information about the standard and tailored assistance entitlements available. Again, that goes back to that clear, plain language and legible. They must use their best endeavours to provide standard and tailored assistance, which again Matt touched on. So best endeavours obviously taking into consideration preferred communication methods. However, if doing alternative methods where a customer may be non-responsive to the retailer's attempts, or if the communication is unsuccessful, you know, for example, emails bounce back or the phone number's disconnected, or they receive return to sender mail that indicates that the customer hasn't received the information about the assistance to which they are entitled to. The more circumstances that are known to the retailer, the greater ability they have to tailor that payment assistance to best support the needs of the customer. However, retailers can't require information that is restricted, which Matt will go into in the next slide, and also any sensitive information should, of course, be handled in accordance with privacy laws. Retailers are also expected to cooperate, or obligated, sorry, to cooperate with support services such as government, EWOV, and community groups and services such as yourselves, who are providing support to a customer. Okay, Matt, this is your area.
Yep. Okay, so clause 91 of the code talks about a prohibition on retailers requiring personal or financial information from customers. It's a part of the code that's close to my heart at the moment, because it's one of my current investigations is into this clause. So a retailer cannot impose a condition on the provision of assistance that requires a customer to provide personal or financial information, or to waive an entitlement that they have under the payment difficulty framework. A retailer, of course, may ask a customer about any factors that are likely to affect their energy consumption in relation to providing advice and practical assistance. So it's reasonable that a retailer may ask for some personal or financial information to help them provide the assistance that's available. The PDF framework supports open communication between retailers and customers, and the retailers must take into account any of the personal information that they've received voluntarily from customers. But a retailer cannot force a customer to provide that information that a customer hasn't or doesn't want to volunteer. This absolutely directly impacts on financial counsellors, because a retailer therefore cannot require a customer to speak to a financial counsellor before they decide to provide assistance, or before they continue to provide assistance if they've missed a payment planned payment, for example. And in fact, if you're aware of that happening, I'd particularly over the last few months, I would ask you to reach out to us and to let us know. I'd love to have a chat with you about it. I suppose clause 91 is all about the requirement. They certainly have retailers certainly have the ability to ask questions of customers, but they absolutely do not have the power to require the provision of that information if there's a threat of disconnection, or of not providing the assistance if they don't. There's a bit of information here about Centrepay. What it really boils down to is that retailers have to provide customers with a plan that allows them to pay by way of Centrepay. So they, if a customer is not on a plan that allows for payment of bills by Centrepay, then the retailer is obligated to review their contract And if they find a more appropriate contract, then with the consent of the customer, with explicit informed consent, they can switch them to the more appropriate plan. And if the retailer doesn't offer a more appropriate plan, then they must make Centre Pay available on the plan that they're on. They can't charge customers for the review or for the transfer to the alternative contract, or for ending the other contract earlier. But really, the point of all of that information is that retailers must offer customers a plan to be able to pay by Centre Pay.
Okay. So just a little bit of information about embedded networks, which I did not know what these were until I started at the Essential Services Commission. So basically they're exempt retailers, and they don't need to hold a license, but they do hold an exemption. So embedded networks, they operate their own networks. So that might be a large apartment building, retirement villages, caravan parks. These are the types of facilities that fit under that embedded network framework. So if a customer is part of an embedded network, they are still entitled to payment assistance. So embedded network providers must offer some of the forms of assistance, primarily what's under the Tier 1 assistance. So repayment of arrears over that 2-year period. So they need to offer that assistance to their customers. Customers are entitled to receive advice about payment options to enable them to pay that arrears over the 2-year period. They're also entitled to the advice from about government and non-government assistance, grants and concessions. And as with all customers receiving or entitled to tailored assistance, they're entitled to any other assistance that the retailer wants to provide over and above that minimum. So I guess just another thing to note is they do not generally have to offer that Tier 2 payment plan where they put the arrears on hold and customers pay less than ongoing costs. So it's just the 4 that I previously mentioned. Okay, so there's something in our guidance note that talks about the shared responsibility. So this is important. So basically it's around communication engagement by retailers and customers being essential to achieve the objectives of payment difficulty framework. So I guess that if that's a takeaway I can leave you with is that's really important to engage on both sides. Obviously retailers are absolutely the ones that have the obligations, and they're the ones that can face penalties if they don't comply with those obligations. However, and customers aren't subject to any obligations. However, if they don't engage or otherwise respond to a retailer's attempts to provide assistance under the payment difficulty framework, this is probably going to lead to the quickest pathway to a lawful disconnection, essentially. If the customer is engaging with their retailer, whether it's proactively or responding to the retailer's attempts, and they still get disconnected for non-payment, then they may be eligible for what's called a wrongful disconnection payment. I guess the best advice I can ask you to give your clients is to contact their retailer as soon as they anticipate any difficulty they may have in paying their bills, and that they respond to their retailer's attempts to contact them. Obviously, we appreciate that customers may be anxious or uncomfortable at the thought of that, particularly if they're vulnerable and facing those payment difficulties. I guess that's where you guys come in as the community groups and EWOS to assist with navigating that process or potentially contacting the retailer on their behalf. When things go wrong, basically EWOS can assist customers with individual disputes. They're best escalated straight to EWOS, and they can do that one-on-one conciliation and dispute resolution. They can also arrange a reconnection to occur straight away while that dispute is in the process of being resolved. in terms of what to report to us, if a retailer is engaging in repetitive concerning conduct that may breach the payment difficulty framework or the code in any other aspect, please report that to us for further investigation, and we can consider that for potential compliance or enforcement action, so we can stop the conduct from continuing and also prevent more customers from being affected by that conduct. Matt, hand over to you, Matt.
Oh, yep. So in relation to the content of this slide, questions to ask your client, we certainly don't presume to tell you what questions to ask your clients. These are more questions that would help us to assess a case and see where it kind of sits in the payment difficulty framework continuum. So I'll continue that sales pitch that Linda just started and say that if you become aware that a retailer may have breached the code, we would absolutely like you to tell us about it. We have a different responsibility from EWOV, from the Ombudsman. EWOV can mediate disputes and try to get individual remedies for customers. We don't intervene individual cases. We act on issues that are in the public interest, and we have to prioritize our resources to try and stop widespread or systemic conduct affecting a lot of customers. For example, we recently began looking into a matter that potentially affects up to 6,000 customers. But we will absolutely record and analyze all reports that come to us. We will look for patterns and trends in the reports that come to us, and we will look for even individual accounts of conduct that's so egregious that we want to take immediate action or to issue swift penalties to make a point that it won't be tolerated in the future. So yeah, if you think that the code, that there might have been a breach of the code, we absolutely want to know about it. The questions that we've got up here, like I say, are some of the things that that would help us to assess the case and to help us to try and figure out what kind of breaches may have occurred. And there's some more.
I just go to the last slide.
I think so.
There you go.
Okay, and we're pretty much done now. So this is a list of things that would help us to both assess cases and to collect evidence, weigh up that evidence, and be able to present it to the commissioners. In effect, I suppose all of these things are documentary evidence of potential breaches. So anything that's written down, any correspondence that you can either gather from clients, or if a client is willing to talk to us, which I hope in the future they would be. We're all pretty nice people. Then things that you could advise them to keep. So if they've received a reminder notice and but it looks like a breach may have occurred somewhere, tell them not to throw it out, to keep it, because we're going to want to see it. As part of our investigation, of course, we have coercive powers to be able to gather these sort of documents from energy businesses. But it's absolutely valuable for us to see it from the customer's point of view too. And there's a whole lot of other things which like when it was sent, when it was received, if there's handwritten notes on it, there's a whole lot of things that would help our investigations if the customers keep them. And that's it. So I think we'd be happy to take questions now, but I think that we're kind of out of time for our presentation, and we're about to go in the breakout rooms where you can ask them. So Annie, are you happy for us to move on?
Look, thank you, Matt and Linda. That was fantastic. We are going to go into the breakout rooms, and I think we'll do that where you'll be in much smaller groups. We've got some case studies to work through, and also you're in a better position to ask questions. So without further ado, I am going to send you all off into breakout rooms. I have sorted them all out, so I hope they all work, and this is the magic of digital. So you will get an invitation to enter a room. Please accept it. And from there, the people who are running the rooms will tell you what's going on. I'll see you back here. I'll bring you all back in about half an hour. So enjoy.
Hi, I'm a financial counsellor at Catholic Care Sandhurst in Bendigo.
Terrific, thank you. Deb?
Hi everybody, I'm Deb. I'm based at Anglicare in the West, but I split my time between there and the Inner Melbourne Community Legal Centre. I'm a financial counsellor.
Terrific, thank you. Dacia?
Hi everyone, I'm Darcia. I work at West Justice Community Legal Centre and I run their economic abuse project.
Great, thank you. Jennifer?
Hi everyone, I work with Uniting, what was Uniting Kildonan, in the enterprise partnership team with the consumer advocacy, mostly in training.
Thank you. Anne, you're joining us as well. Well, I think you've probably already introduced yourself.
Okay. I'm going to be flitting around, but yes, so I'm the Education and Engagement Officer for Energy and working with Casper to present these to you. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong screen. I'll put you over here.
Right. Holly.
Hi everyone, I'm Holly. I'm a financial counsellor at Good Shepherd ANZ. I work in the Good Money store in Morwell, and I don't have my camera on because I've been having internet issues, so I have to apologise about that. It's been a nightmare.
I'm one of the people in the 40 to 80 k's away range, and my internet tends to drop out at the most inconvenient moments as well. So if that happens right now, that's my excuse for no longer participating.
So just to
I think what we're tasked to do here is work. Sorry?
You just demonstrated that.
Oh, did I? Right. Oh, there you go. What I was trying to say is we're here to do a couple of case studies, and I think I just need to copy those into the chat, or at least the first one, and let's see if that works. I hope everyone can see that.
Yep, beautiful.
I'll give you a moment to read. So, in light of that detailed presentation we've just heard from Linda and Matt, what do you think Joe should be doing?
Communicate with the retailer. He is entitled to one of those available payment difficulty ideas. So
yes.
And also perhaps entitled to, I don't know, is he entitled to an ERGS grant?
Any ideas? What should Joe do? Should he make contact? Should he wait for his retailer?
Well, he should have received some. He should have received some updates from the retailer for sure. Whether it was a notice, he should have. If he's missed 2 payments, he should have received at least 2 notices regarding that, either emailed or SMS, or however he's engaged to communicate with the retailer.
I'd agree with that. The email issue is interesting. So because the retailer can really only do that if you have provided explicit informed consent to actually receiving things by email. So if Joe hasn't done that, it should come in the mail.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point, actually.
And I think the retailer is obliged to contact him to discuss his hardship options as well. Given that he's missed 2 payments, there should be a number of them available to him, at least in that tier 1 category. So they should be making contact to discuss what options he has.
So would John be eligible for, as you say, tier 1? So the
I'm so sorry, Casper, you completely cut out there.
Component of the standard assistance component as part of this situation.
We didn't get most of that, Casper. You might want to drop your video because we didn't get your audio there at all. Thank you.
Yes, Steve is now telling me that my connection is unstable. So I said
you're unstable, accept it.
Well, I hope it's not me, but rather my internet connection that's unstable.
I think that situation is related to the tier 2.
So the tailored assistance rather than standard assistance?
The tailored assistance, because the tier 1 was when people were up to date with their bills and wanting assistance. Tier 2 was where they were behind.
Does it depend on what his arrears are?
The assistance to which the customer is entitled under division and how to access it. Subclause 2, the energy retailers are required to contact a residential customer who has not paid a bill by its pay by date and who has arrears of $55, including GST, within 21 business days after that pay by date, and given information about the assistance to which the customer is entitled under this division and how to access it. So yeah, so just have the energy retail code. I'm sure you've all got that, or have that on your desktop. The subclause 3, the retailer must allow the customer no less than 6 business days to consider the information given under subclause 1 and 2, requesting information and put forward payment proposal. A question for the group. If Joe says he doesn't think his retailer has tried to contact him, but can be sure because he doesn't answer blocked phone numbers and often doesn't open his bills, should you try to find out? There's not an EWOF person here, is there? No?
Yes, I think
Yes.
Joshua is with us.
Yep.
Joshua, sorry, Joshua?
Yeah, myself and Kathy. Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, what was the question? What was the question, David?
Well, the question to the group was, if Joe says he doesn't think his retailer has tried to contact him, but can't be sure because he doesn't answer blocked phone numbers and often doesn't open his bill, should you try to find out?
Well, part of our investigation would be to ask those questions of the retailer. We would expect them to provide a certain level of evidence as to contact. So copies of letters, would get the contact notes from them. So a review of telephone calls that have been sent. We'll request recordings of the calls if there are any. We'll also request whether there's the contact notes would also stipulate if there's any SMSs, etc., sent saying we tried to contact you. So there would be a certain degree of investigation on that point. If the customer's not answered phone calls, blocked phone calls, he's disregarded mail, not opened it, we consider that it's reasonable to expect that the retailer would expect the customer to open that mail. So that would be put back on the customer to some degree.
So alleviate any of his anxieties, reassure that you'd be there to assist.
We'll be certainly there to investigate, to make sure that they've ticked all the right boxes with regard to the levels of assistance that they should be offering. Yeah.
Okay. Anne's joined us. Any other comments, Anne?
I'm interested to also know, what do financial counsellors do if they don't go to EWOF? So if you got this case, what would you do automatically, or know to do or not know to do after what you've heard today?
Well, you could offer to, I mean, depending how busy the guy is and how much antipathy he has to the retailer, you can offer to call them on their behalf, go the whole authority route. I mean, I have clients who have psychotic delusions about energy retailers, that they just cannot speak to an energy retailer because they feel they're the devil. It's quite extraordinary how they have come part of people's psychic landscapes. But I think if this isn't one of those extreme cases, but he is busy, if he feels he's got anger issues, that it's not going to go well, that he might, get disgruntled with whoever he's talking to at the retailer, I would suggest that I can speak to the retailer for him.
Yeah. I just had someone ring me when the presentation was on, and it was an Aboriginal woman who's got an $800 gas bill, and she's really upset, but she was like yelling. She says, I don't know why, and I haven't done it, and whatever. So, I mean, I asked her about the utility relief grant, and she's going to apply for it, but I'm going to ring her back after I get off this presentation and I said, I'll ring you back to see how you go. So if she wasn't successful, it's a bit hard working remotely, but I would have to ring the company and then get them to ring her so that she would give authority, and then I would sort of speak on her behalf. So, and I would make sure I knew what I was talking about by, you know, perhaps having the code in front of me, like with utility relief grant. I know the criteria for that. But if it was in relation to the David, the case you're talking about, I would talk to the company about the fact that they're not complying with the code and that, you know, they need to arrange this, make an affordable payment for this person, understand that they've been late.
I put those 2 links in the chat as well, the utility relief grants. So if you haven't got those, just be aware that I've put those. Now, and the utility companies have to assist them with those, is that correct?
From the 1st of October. So we're going to discuss this at the next workshop just because it's closer to the date. But from the 1st of October, we've got new reforms that will actually require energy companies to help your clients fill out the form, the utility relief form, over the phone.
Yeah. That can be good or bad. If it's family violence, I wouldn't suggest that's a great idea. But.
That's up to, I suppose the person doesn't have to accept it. I was just going to ask you all, how many of you refer to EWOS? Or online. Even on behalf of, even working with your clients? Because we just...
Yeah, I referred yesterday. Someone rang me yesterday and she had rung the company and she could only afford $50. They said she had to pay $82, and she's an Aboriginal woman who's just escaped family violence and living in Aboriginal housing. And I explained to her, I said, it would be really good if you could ring EWOV because that makes a change. It's not just change, you know, not just fixing up your situation. And I rang her back afterwards and she was really happy with the response she got from EWOV. And she said, you know, they ended up because she had to send her, she had to give her email address and hers was the Hawks, and she said we ended up laughing because she barracks for Collingwood, so she felt
it was me. I took that call.
Oh, you did?
Embarrassing. No. Yes.
Kathy, did you?
Yeah.
She loved
Can you see
it.
the Collingwood in the background?
She loves you.
She was
We're not getting
lovely.
off topic, are we?
It was lovely. She was.
Yeah, she wants you to help. Oh, isn't that interesting?
Small world.
Yeah, small world. Sprung.
All right. So, sorry to cut you off there. So the minimum assistance, that's clause 79. I just want to wrap up. Are we happy with what we've discussed so far before we move on to the next one? Are you happy with that?
I'm going to duck out. I'll see you back in.
Thanks, Anne. So I've got those 2 links that I've just pasted.
Provisions are sort of designed that there should be a good reason for that, in that either it's a customer that has a reasonable belief that their circumstances are going to change, like if they just have a short period of poor health or unemployment or the like, or that the retailer has given them a lot of information on how to reduce their usage and done one of those sort of energy audits that they do, so that they're actually working to reduce that monthly usage, unlike, as you say, ending up in a situation where they're on a very low payment plan, which might be affordable, but they're just constantly going backwards and building up that arrears with no hope of ever paying it off. That's certainly not a situation we would want to end up in.
Thank you.
No worries. Anything else?
Alice, I've
gone quiet as Anne has come in.
I've just dropped in. Can I ask people a question? How many of you refer to EWOS? Or do you handle a lot of these really difficult, they take a lot of time. So interesting so I think 2 of you, was it, who refer to EWOF? Do you sometimes work with your clients and EWOF, so you might be an authorised person?
Yeah, we generally try and resolve it ourselves first, and then last resort go to EWOF if we can't resolve it ourselves.
Where's my EWOF person? Hien. Last resort.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
How
interesting.
busy, I suppose.
There's a lot of the time you can resolve it. It just needs,
great.
you know, a third party to negotiate it or whatever, so that the client, I don't know whether they get, you know, too involved into it about, you know, making the plans and stuff like that. And some of them get forced into, or they tell us that they've been demanded to pay a certain amount before they'll reconnect them, things like that. Like we'll go to EWOF and report that and stuff like that. But most of the time we'll try and talk to them first, the company. Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah.
That's really good. It just, sometimes we know the time it can take, and you guys are usually so time poor. EWOF is such a fabulous way of relieving some of your work.
Yeah. But I mean, with the hardship numbers and stuff like that, you seem to get to know some people in those teams as well. So yeah, it's kind of, you make a bit of a relationship with some of them. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
I must admit, I haven't had to use EWOF for the last 12 or 18 months, but I have certainly used them over the years, for sure.
Okay, interesting. I'll let you go, Alice.
Sure thing. Thanks, Anne. I guess the other thing we had noted down here, which was
So I think that's where, people, helpers like yourself, the financial counsellors, community legal, might be able to help the customer resolve some issues with the retailer, and gone through those steps. Would you say so as well?
Yeah, there's a step that we have introduced, and that's a discretionary upgrade to an investigation. If we find the customer's particularly vulnerable for any reason, maybe they haven't got the capability to do their own research, or there's some other issues, mental health, or they're victim of family violence, or there are other barriers for them going back into to the retailer on their own, we have a discretionary upgrade policy where we'll take those customers through and we'll do that negotiation with the retailer on their behalf without them having gone back to the retailer first. So we do try and make sure that we're looking after customers who really haven't got the tools or the capability to do that on their own. And so we're happy to work with financial counsellors around that as well.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good. I would also say just quickly that EWOV, when we refer, because we get a lot of CORO from customers at the ESC, I'd just quickly say that, yeah, even if there isn't a clear contravention of the rules in our framework, EWOV can help, my understanding is EWOV can help customers obtain a fair and reasonable outcome, even if the breach isn't clear.
That's right. So that's, as I said, that's our objective, to make sure that the entitlements are made available and that customers are getting what they're entitled to. We would only really do a compliance investigation if there's a disconnection. The rest of our investigations are really about making sure the customer has a fair and reasonable outcome and sustainable ongoing payment arrangements.
Yeah, good. Okay, I'll move on quickly, I think. How much time do we have left, Jess, do you know?
I was just about to flag, I think we've got about 2 minutes left. So maybe if there's any last minute questions, I know that's always the hard part.
I think there was another, so this, I need to go through the tailored assistance provision quickly. So this is the sort of forms of assistance that, that retailers need to offer customers in arrears. So this is the tailored assistance clauses. The clause is titled minimum assistance, but this is minimum tailored assistance. And this is 79, and 79 lists out, subclause 1 lists out all the different types of tailored assistance. Now, your next question should be who is entitled to what? And that is where tier 1 and tier 2 come in. And where we find tier 1 and tier 2 is, just quickly, is in subclauses 2 and 3. So you will notice tier 1 and tier 2 is not in the code, but subclause 2 is tier 1 for those customers who can pay their ongoing energy use. And then tier 2 is subclause 3, which is those customers who cannot pay for their ongoing energy use. And each of these types of customers are entitled to the assistance outlined above, inclusive. So that's A to D inclusive, not A or B or C or D. It's A and B and C and D. And then you'll see it actually overlaps, starts from C to F for the customers who cannot pay for their ongoing energy use. And then we have a special one, which is any assistance consistent with this, any assistance consistent with this objective of this division.
1 minute, June.
Yes. Okay.
Breakout rooms. Okay.
Thank you.
Magically, I think we're getting nearly everyone back. So I'm going to ask, just go around to the rooms and ask someone, one of the people from each room, just to give us just a really, really quick update or report on what are the key things that came out. And just to let you all know, we are sending out the slides And we will send you out the case studies with the so-called answers, but just the relevant provisions underneath so that you've got those just as a reference point. And that's along with our survey at the end of this. So room 1, I think we had David and Satish and Joshua from EWOV. If one of you want to, or unless you've nominated someone else from the room to just give us a bit of a report.
We approach it as more of an open conversation about some of the experiences that our participants had, and we also talked about some of the practicalities of some of the how it all works together. We probably ended with a really interesting one in relation to how it all works, particularly if you've got someone who's working to reduce consumption, for example. How does it actually work in a practical sense if you're in some sort of public housing and you don't have any other means to reduce the consumption any further? I mean, that was actually how we ended. And what was that last point that we made? Who was it that brought
Colin.
Point?
Yeah, it's Colin here. I was suggesting that perhaps the enforcement powers of the Essential Services Commission might extend to a government department, to the Department of Housing, who provides the public housing, so that they can undertake audits and the necessary repairs to make properties better insulated, cooler in summer, warmer in winter, to help the utilities bills be more affordable.
Thanks, Colin.
Well, Colin, I don't know that we're that brave to take on another government department in a boxing ring.
No, but it is an important issue, this one.
Oh, I know.
Because there's no point, it's no point training people up to have this spiel to tell people who are in hardship that they should reduce their consumption, because it's a very upsetting and disturbing thing to hear when you're really on the edge, because you just have no options about what to do, and then people say, well, just reduce your consumption.
Yeah. And Amanda,
if I could, I would.
And
one of the important things,
the sort of issues that Amanda and Colin have raised are really practical issues. So if you could just save me a minute or so at the end to wrap up, because I'd just like to hear from other room chats as well. There are some really sensible, common sense issues that have been raised that I'd just like to address in an overall sense at the end, if that's possible.
Great. Okay. Well, we'll move. There is a question in the chat. Does the PDF apply to accounts that have defaulted and are now listed on clients' credit history? We're going to take that on notice, and we'll give that response in our wrap up, if that's okay, in the written wrap up, so that you've got it there. I'm just going to move to room 2, and that was room 2 that had Cynthia and Fiona and Casper.
I'm going to let someone else speak for a change.
Well, my connection wasn't as good as it perhaps could have been during the breakout room, but I think overall the discussion was that we perhaps need a little bit more information to know exactly what Joe's situation is, including the amount of his arrears. But I think the overall sense is that we would strongly encourage Joe to not ignore phone calls and open up his correspondence and just actively engage with his retailer to try to find out what exactly his options are. And then, of course, there are positive obligations on the retailer to provide information to Joe.
Okay. And were there any other issues that people brought up, Casper? Or anyone from that room? I think Casper's internet's died.
Well, we were discussing right at the end what happens to a customer if they can't meet their consumption and the account has been on hold for 6 months. What happens when it comes off hold and the customer still can't meet consumption? And Cynthia was addressing that from EWOF's point of view, and then the Oscar music started and we got pulled out of our room.
Is that what happens at the end? Oh, sorry, I can't control.
No, I'm kidding. That was a joke.
Okay. Okay. Fiona, have you got those notes taken down?
Yes, yeah.
We'll make sure we look at some of these and give you as much response as we can in our wrap up. We're just going to run out of time right now. Room 4, we had June, Jess and Janine. Have I just managed to skip a room? I have Alice, sorry, room 3, Alice, James and Hien from EWOV.
So we discussed a handful of issues, but two noteworthy ones were what happens when a customer doesn't have the capacity to pay off a large arrears over the 2 years that we stipulate in the code. And it was pointed out that there are ways that, you know, these sort of situations can be negotiated with a retailer, possibly asking to apply missed pay on time discounts and that sort of thing to bring that arrears down. And it also was mentioned that 2 year period is it's a minimum. It's not the there's room to extend the period in which they can pay it off beyond the 2 years if necessary. And there was also some discussion about customers being put on payment plans that are unaffordable to customers that are proposed by the retailer to a customer, and the customer says, yes, okay, I'll take it, but then it turns out that they can't afford to pay. And so we went through some of the criteria that retailers must meet as a minimum with their payment plans, and the circumstances in which a retailer is obligated to accept a payment plan that's been proposed. And then there's also a grace period after a retailer has offered a plan to a customer where they can go away, they can discuss it with their financial counsellor, think about whether they can actually afford this plan, and then come back to the retailer. And that's a 6-day window there. So yeah, that was a couple of issues from us.
Thanks, James. The next room is room 4, June, Jess and Janine. Oh, I've managed to do 3 J's and 3 M's in some of these rooms. That's pretty amazing. Yes, you guys.
June, did you want to reflect on some of the things we heard?
Yeah, sure. I think I heard that a lot of what the financial counsellors were dealing with was customers coming to them at the very tail end of the PDF cycle, if we call it that, and that was when they received the disconnection warning notice. And customers will say they haven't received any other correspondence before that, and it's, you know, what can we do in that point? And I think the key point is that there is relevant information in that correspondence, or there should be. And it's not the heading that says pay your bill, but the heading that says here is how we can help you. Here's how the retailer can support you. So it's that heading that they need to focus on and reach out to their retailer for that assistance.
Okay, all right, thanks, June. I'm going to move on quickly to room 5, which is Matt, Maggie and Mita.
Hey, so we had a good discussion. We actually could have used more time. You were right, Anne. Went quick. We obviously had a chat about Joe, like everyone else did, but just a couple of points that were raised outside of that were the a bit of a lack of trust in the marketplace between the energy businesses and the customers, and a reflection that the ESC has an objective to build that, to rebuild that trust. The importance of EWOV, that EWOV is such a good help in these type of situations, and they're available and they're there, and to that kind of led into the point that if a customer is engaging and not missing consecutive payments with in relation to their bills and their payment plans, then it would be very hard for a retailer to lawfully disconnect. But it's so important that engagement's there. And we also had a chat about clause 89 and those general obligations. And although we ran out of time at the end, although the code doesn't prescribe every type of circumstance that might come up, there are those general obligations to be fair and reasonable.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And quickly to our last group before I hand back to Satish. So that was Linda, Peter and Ruth.
I'm happy to speak unless anyone else wants to share what they found the most interesting. But so yeah, we had a good discussion. We actually had quite a few varied questions. Really interesting questions about overseas call centres and how retailers ensure that their contracted providers are giving Victorian customers all the information about their entitlements. Basically, as the buck stops with the retailer, so they've got to put processes and controls and training in to make sure that that is happening. So we had a question about utility relief grant scheme, which I'm taking on notice because I didn't have the answer. So it was a question about is it mandatory for was it collections or arrears to be put on hold while a grant application is being processed? So you take that one down for the wrap up, Anne.
I'll get that from you. So everyone who's taken notes, I'm going to get those from you.
And also we had quite a bit of conversation about, I guess, authority to contact the retailer or engage with the retailer on behalf of the customer. And I guess the difficulties associated with that and you know, when there's automated systems set up to send out text reminders and so forth, or I guess there's probably limits to how much a community organisation or financial counsellor can act on their behalf. So yeah, that was a really interesting discussion as well.
Yeah, good point. Thank you all so much. We are running out of time, but I'm going to hand to Satish.
Thank you, Anne. Can I just start with one very quick aside that Matt reminded me in terms of a shout out to Cynthia and her team. In our group as well, Carmel commented on a case study of just happened yesterday for an Aboriginal lady who ended up calling EWOV and got the best service possible and is delighted with the service that she's received from EWOV, and that person who provided that service happened to be in the same chat room. So that's Kathy from your organisation. So congratulations, Cynthia, and the service that EWOV is providing. As Matt said, it is genuinely being recognised as being extremely valuable to the community. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity for one final set of comments. The suggestions that I heard in the summary processes and in the chat room that we were listening to are extremely, extremely valuable, sensible, commonsensical observations and experiences that you are engaging with on a day-to-day basis. As I indicated earlier, the Commission will be reviewing the payment difficulties framework after 2 years of operation, which will start either at the end of this year, but most likely early next year. Your feedback into that process, because the whole point of this is to make it work for the community. There is no real benefit to anyone in having processes and things that are put in place that are just unrealistic in a community sense. So can I urge you, please, if you can provide whatever feedback you can on the payment difficulties framework, because we will ensure that if you can't make submissions to the review, all of the feedback that you provide now, our teams through Anne and her colleagues will feed in to that PDF framework review processes. So any of the questions you've heard, any of the things that you've thought about that have come to mind in light of the discussions, would you please just spare 5-10 minutes on the email or contact and send them through to Anne and her team by way of feedback or further comments or questions. We would really value this, because the point, as I keep wanting to emphasize, is we want to get genuine improvements in outcomes for energy consumers in Victoria. This is not some theoretical legal exercise that we're on. We want some practical day-to-day outcomes reinforced by enforcement action where that is necessary. So thank you very much for your participation again. I'd certainly acknowledge that we are short of time with these workshops, and that may mean at the end of the series of workshops, if there is sufficient interest left, that sometime into next year we may be able to arrange some sort of a conference or a seminar that goes for a longer period of time, that allows breakout rooms for a greater degree of discussion. But it all really depends on whether this works for you or whether it doesn't. If it doesn't, we don't want to waste your time. If it does, we thank you sincerely for your contribution and participation, and we'll try and provide more for you. Thank you for your participation today. Thanks, Anne.
Thank you. And just before you go, the next workshop will focus on disconnections. That's on the 27th of September. You will all get invitations via Eventbrite to those who've already attended, and you can send those on. We've realised we do need to have a limit so that the breakout rooms work. If the breakout rooms are really big, then I don't think they're going to be as effective. So if I can get more staff, we can have more breakout rooms, but it's just a balancing act, which I'm sure all of you are very much used to. So thank you again. We will get the wrap up out to you. If it's not by tomorrow, it'll be the first couple of days of next week. That will include a survey, a short survey, and the slides and some more information for you. We are here. If you have questions that we can help you with, please don't hesitate to send them to us and we'll respond to you as fast as we can. Thank you, everyone. Lovely to see you.
Thank you all. Thanks, everyone.